Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. Swing a sparrow on a string. Angela opened her eyes to a new day, not knowing if it were morning. There were no windows in her room, and it could have been the middle of the afternoon, or even midnight. She heard no sounds except her own breathing, and when she awoke, she inhaled and exhaled heavily, as if she had just completed a marathon race instead of having slept for hours. Perhaps she had slept for days. She had stopped wondering about time months ago. Now she simply slept for as long as she was able, then stayed awake for as long as was necessary. She knew she would have to eat, that they would soon be coming with food, and had she felt stronger, she might have spat it back at them, as she had done when they first brought her here. But she had swallowed that rage a long time ago. Now, Angela ate whatever morsels they gave her, and recently she had to restrain herself from thanking them. She feared the day might come when she would feel grateful that they had allowed her to live, when she might find herself smiling at them as if she understood and accepted the perfect correctness of her captivity. She looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror above the sink. Although her hair was stringy and unwashed, she remembered how golden it had shimmered in the sun. Her face was still quite pretty, and once she had heard one guard tell another he had never seen eyes quite that blue. The other whispered what a pity it was if only she had a piece of paper, a pen, even a crayon. Maybe this time she would show them that she could create something useful and lasting that mattered to them, something that in turn would make her matter. When Angela had first arrived, they had eagerly granted the request of the 18-year-old girl and waited to see what gifts her imagination might offer them. She had succeeded only in producing a few formless scrawls that they said were not art, and some rhymeless gibberish that they told her was not poetry. They took away the paper, the pens, and the paintbrushes, and not long ago, the tall blonde guard, who wore the keys around his neck, had asked her if she might like to sing. Any tune would do, he told her. Please, oh please, let me try, Angela had begged. The next day, he brought to her room a small cassette recorder with a blank tape. Perhaps we will find the songbird in you, where we were unable to find the artist. Sing, and we promise to listen, he assured her. For days, Angela sang alone in her room, remembering what her mother had sung to her many years ago. "Hush, little baby. Don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." A week later, she handed the cassette to the man with the keys and simply said, "Please." He stuffed the tape into his pocket and left without a word. The next day, the guard sat alongside her bed and informed her that he and the others had decided that she was no songbird. For a moment, his words had sounded like an apology. She knew she would never see the tall guard again. The wasted papers that Angela had filled with nonsense and the inarticulate squawks she had tried to pass off as music had convinced them that further efforts on their part would be foolish. From that day forward, the guards who silently delivered her food seemed unwilling to even look at her. Angela heard the key slip into the lock on the other side of the heavy door. She no longer pretended to be asleep when they came, because they did not care whether she were sleeping or awake. One of them always waited outside as the other entered. She heard the heavy jingle of keys and looked up. The keys were around the guard's neck. "You," she said. But the word was only a statement of fact, not sparked with the warmth that accompanies the recognition of a familiar face. Once uttered, the word sounded idiotic. "Yes," he answered, closing the door behind him. He did not look at her as he set the tray of food on the stand alongside her bed. She had expected no further conversation, and when he spoke again, his words startled her. "They told me to say the other guard had caught a flu." He pulled up the small wooden chair and sat, although the chair was too small, and he seemed not to know whether to fold his legs. "There is no flu. They wanted us to talk." His statement was ludicrous. She had not had a conversation with him in months, and those few she remembered had been pitifully brief and one-sided. "I don't understand," she said, as she selected a small bread crust on her tray. She had learned to keep her responses short, for the guards tired of her quickly. "I'd like to know about God," he said, as if this were meant as an answer. "Tell me how you feel about God. Tell me about your religion, your beliefs." "I have no belief in God. I have no religion." "Don't you have some sort of records about that?" She felt immediately sorry she had asked, but the guard ignored the question anyway. He fidgeted in the small chair. "You're an atheist, then? Or an agnostic? You have opinions regarding God's existence, or the lack of it?" He sounded almost hopeful. "I'm an apathist. I don't much think about it," she answered as she nibbled at the crust. She picked up a slab of egg yolk with her left hand, ignoring the silverware, leaned her head back, and dropped the yolk into her mouth. Her response oddly pleased him, although he did not smile. "An apathist? That was a joke you just said." "Admittedly, not a very good one, but it was a joke." "Then you have a sense of humor. Tell me another joke." Angela looked hard at the man, not certain about how earnest her guard's question was. A joke? You mean, like, why did the chicken cross the road? The absurdity of her question seemed to increase the guard's excitement. Yes. Yes. Tell me, why did the chicken cross the road? There was anticipation in his voice, as if he sincerely were interested in the chicken's intentions. And when he leaned toward Angela for her response, his face revealed the hint of a smile. Perhaps the chicken was an apathist, she said. The guard's smile disappeared as quickly as if it were erased. That isn't funny. I'm sorry, but that isn't funny at all. His tone became flat, expressionless. He sounded like a man keeping some kind of score. No points for humor. Sorry. Next category. Can we talk politics? He asked. No. Sociology, science, history, law, philosophy. His questions now had become a formality, a checklist to be completed, filed, and forgotten. No. 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 Although Angela could not remember ever having had a discussion this long during her stay here, she wanted this conversation to end. Perhaps I could tell you why the philosopher crossed the road? No, I guess you're right. That wasn't very funny either. I suppose you'll be leaving now. Her question had anticipated his next words. The tall guard rose from the chair with difficulty, trying to maintain his dignity when he could not get up with his first attempt. I have one more question for you, Angela, he said. He had never called her by her name before, and his doing so struck her as odd. He walked to the foot of her bed and turned toward her. Do you know why you are here? He asked this without malice or emotion, with only the desire to know her answer, as he had wanted to know about songbirds and chickens. I'm here because you see me as a useless bird. Having said the words, she knew they had always been on her tongue, waiting to be spoken. I beg your pardon. You know, the sparrow who can no longer fly becomes useless to the other sparrows, a burden to them. I've broken my wing, isn't that right? And the flock has no further need of me. I'm impressed, the guard answered. That is quite a creative analogy from one who knows so little of creativity. He sat on the edge of the bed and moved close to Angela, as if to reveal a secret. Instead, he reached under the blanket and grabbed hold of her right hand, yanking it out from where she had kept it hidden. He held her arm straight up, and the pain caused her to wince. But this isn't exactly a broken wing, is it, Angela? It's a wilted arm, a useless limb. It is not pleasant to look at. It serves no function, and it belongs to you. It is you. The words came in furious bursts now, like machine gun pellets, and he shook her withered limb as he spoke. You see yourself as a wounded sparrow, do you? What happens if we take that sparrow and tie her leg to a string and swing her around in circles in a desperate attempt to make her fly? She struggles against hope to use her wings, her useless wings. And meanwhile, we swing her around and around and around, wasting our energy, wasting our time. And in the end, when we stop swinging her, she comes crashing down to earth anyway. Our time has been wasted. Her hopes have been destroyed. What is the point? Why even bother? He let go of her arm, allowing it to drop. For a moment, Angela stared at the shrunken arm as if it were a foreign thing that did not belong in the bed with her. She spoke without removing her eyes from it. A sparrow who can no longer fly can sing. And if she can't sing, she can still feel, can still love? The guard interrupted. That's exactly right, Angela. We asked this sparrow to sing, and she could not. But we realized she may be capable of love. The kind of love that could only result in frustration for her. Because the real question is she capable of being loved? Do the words she writes encourage love? Does her beauty or intellect in any way inspire it? It is unlikely that anyone would even try to love her because of that hideous limb. Not that all physical impediments are repulsive. Perhaps if she were only blind. Stop. Please, stop. Angela pleaded. Her brief taste of defiance had made her want to gag. You want to cover your ears, don't you? You want to block out the words, make me go away. Maybe you would even like to strike me, he continued. But you can't do it, can you? That limb just lies there like a dead weight. Do you see my point? I have my other arm, whose only function is to hide its companion. No, Angela, I'm sorry, but the time has come for us to stop swinging the sparrow's string. His anger slowly dissolved, and he fell silent for a moment. He attempted to hold her wilted hand in his, but she pulled it away. Instead, he took her other hand. But first, I have something I want to show you. Something you need to see. He sat on the bed and placed her fingers on his left leg below the knee. Rub your hand along my leg, Angela. Does the calf feel peculiar to you? Congenital defect, they called it. Like they called yours. The leg is gone, at least from the knee down. Amazing what they can do with prosthetics today. But you see, I have my particular talents. I happen to be quite good at drawing people out, at enabling them to find a way to compensate for their physical shortcomings. And I can be quite decisive when called upon to make the kind of decisions that others would find distasteful. No one ever asked me to sing or to fly. But when they came for me, I simply told them what I could do. Angela struggled to pull her hand free as her anger rose inside her. like hot bile. But you also decide who is to be exterminated. You decide who the state no longer regards as useful. What gives you the right? This gives me the right, he shouted, his breath hot on her face as he tapped her hand on the hard wood of his prosthetic leg. This has forced me to find my usefulness to others, just as your pathetic limb has forced you to admit that you have none. And I have no intention of relinquishing my usefulness by allowing you to continue your hollow existence. I refuse not to matter. The guard's renewed anger seemed to embarrass him, and he turned away from Angela. He ran his fingers through his blonde hair in an attempt to collect himself. And when he again looked down at his leg, he noticed that Angela's hand was grasping it. Angela knew he had been unaware of her touch until he had looked. When his eyes locked with hers, her mouth curled in a bitter smile. "I feel this," she said, as she ran the tiny hand of the wilted arm along his wooden leg. "I feel this with both of my hands, even the one you call useless. Tell me what you feel when I touch you. Does this prosthetic device extend all the way to your heart?" Angela tapped on the artificial limb as if she were expecting a reflexive kick. "A curious question," he answered. "You might have made a fine idealist if you had believed in God." She moved close to his face and whispered, "To get to the other side, that is why a chicken would cross the road, isn't it?" He paused for a moment to look at her. "Such blue eyes," he said. "Such exquisitely beautiful blue eyes." He called for the guards to take her, and within moments, 3 entered the room, and another 2 waited by the doorway. She presented no struggle and went quietly with them. She wondered as they walked if one of them would take her hand. The courthouse. Almost 8:30 a.m. It was just before court would begin when his dead client, Mr. Black, showed up to talk. Benny knew the consequences for being late, so was short with him. "Why are you here now?" He spoke in a hushed tone to the apparition in front of him, glancing around as the Alameda County courtroom began to fill up. It would ruin his reputation as the best public defender in the county if people thought he spoke to ghosts. Mr. Black's gray suit, the one he used to always wear, appeared now to fit him well. His cuffs were no longer frayed, the holes gone. Benny tasted the bitter shame of his failure with Mr. Black's case as his stomach knotted. "You owe me more." Mr. Black's voice was flat and emotionless, so different from his last day in this courtroom, when the coughs racked his body, his handkerchief filled with blood. Benny's elbows pressed into the table. The air in the courtroom hung thick and stale. His thin fingers nudged the yellow pad, straightening it imperceptibly. He moved his 2 pens, one black and one red, so that they were even to the pad. "I paid my debt," Benny whispered. "With the last one." Mr. Black's anger roared like a fire, heating up the air around Benny like a blast furnace. The other, past inhabitants of this room, raged, their hate overwhelming him, even with so many clients. Benny prided himself that he cared about everyone, those he had saved from jail time, and those who were put away. Mr. Black was the first one to come back and visit him, though, after dying in prison, professing his innocence with his last breath. For the accused, Benny, king of the pleas, was the PD to get in, Alameda County. Most of his clients walked, or at least avoided jail time. Benny averaged 600 cases each year, however, so had some losses. And Benny felt the pain of everyone, but innocence and guilt have no place in the criminal justice system. And Benny had begun to wonder if his work meant anything. Some of his clients were monsters, and better off behind bars. Benny worked for his clients, but he lived in this city, had to deal with the crime and violence. Should he put his thumb on the scales of justice? Today, his past clients were weighing in, screaming in thunderous rage, frustration, and anger at what happened to them in this cursed room. "I shouldn't be here. It's not my fault," one voice called out. "I'm innocent," shouted another, then echoed over and over again into a cacophony, overwhelming Benny. Mr. Black's face leaned in to Benny, his voice roaring. "Pay up, or else." Bang, bang, bang. A gavel thundered, echoing off the wood walls around him. Mr. Black left, fading into the crowd, and taking the voices with him. Benny released his breath, trying to focus on where he was and why. "The court is called to order," the judge called out. A pale, gray man with red and piercing eyes. His head floated above his black cloak. Benny blinked, looking around as the colors of the room came into focus. A man in an ill-fitting suit slumped next to him, eyes downcast. Fear vibrated in waves off the man. The fingers of his left hand pick at the nails of his right, over and over. The scraping sound like claws on steel bars. He leaned over to Benny. "Mr. Benny, we're going to be okay, right? You're going to save me. I mean, we have the receipt. It proves I wasn't there for the rape. They can't put this one on me." Benny nodded, but didn't turn. The man's high-pitched voice whined like a broken motor, his breath hot. Benny suddenly hated him, loathed him for being here and needing Benny's help. His life depended on Benny doing his job correctly. Did this man even deserve it? Benny peered toward him, just a glance out of the corner of his eye. Lean as a mop handle, he could not keep still, shoulders moving, fingers picking at imaginary flecks on his borrowed suit and the skin of his hands. Benny's lip curled in disgust. He opened the file, the case notes in perfect order, the receipt on top, stamped with proof of this man's location across town at the time of the sexual assault. The man's arm crossed in front of Benny, his skin red and mottled with sores. He pushed the receipt with a scarred finger. "My Monopoly card. Get out of jail free." He laughed. "I need to keep that. There are a few other girls they don't know about yet." The man winked. Benny brushed his fingers on the receipt. Manicured fingernails paled over his dark skin, smoothing the wrinkled paper. A loud rushing sound filled Benny's head. They called to him, his clients who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, whose lives he could not save due to a lack of this kind of solid alibi. He heard them screaming, shouting at the unfairness, the inhumanity. At the district attorney's table across from him, a tall, thin woman stared with shrewd, cold eyes. She turned away to put her head down into a stack of files. Voices cried out from her table too. People wronged and insulted in the worst way. Losing property, their self-respect, or their family, and then forced to sit in this horrible room and go home with nothing but tears and anger. Their voices were loud. "Punish! Vengeance! An eye for an eye!" The screams racked Benny's brain, and he shut his eyes. His hands flew to his temple, pressing in to quiet their cries. Bang, bang, bang. The gavel thundered again. Benny stood, motioning to his client to stand as well. Benny clenched his jaw and knew the answer to his dilemma. Forget what was best for the client or society. Benny needed to look out for himself. This man will be sacrificed to Mr. Black to appease him and the demons chasing Benny. This man was guilty, of course. Maybe not for this crime, but for another, Benny was certain. Benny will change places, go from the defender to the accuser, from the protector to the judge. His fingers moved, just a brief sweep, and the paper receipt floated unseen, down out of the file, into the trash can. Gone. The trial moved fast. A police officer, serious and trustworthy in his pressed blue uniform, pointed at the man next to Benny. "That's the guy." Whispers erupted from the courtroom. Bodies shifted on the wooded seats, squeaking with their movements. "That man is just evil. I could tell right off," someone said. "The monster should hang for what he did to that girl." Another voice added. Bang, bang, bang. Justice thundered down from on high. "The verdict is guilty," the judge shouted, a sneer on his face. "Next." Benny squeezed his eyes shut as the voices in his head roared out, echoing, "Guilty! Guilty!" The bailiff pulled on the man next to him. "No, I'm innocent," he screamed. "Mr. Benny, what happened?" Mr. Black appeared in front of Benny, nodding before he left with the man to his future hell. Then the voices were gone, the sudden silence deafening. Benny picked up his red hen to carefully put a small X to the end of the line of thousands of black and red marks, then lifted the next file off the foot-high stack next to him. Justice will be done. The menagerie. Don Benway and his father were regulars at the hospital's oncology department and on familiar terms with Jerry, the head porter. "Morning, handsome," Jerry would say as he approached. "How are we today?" "A darn sight better than you," Walter would say, muttering behind his bandages. Walter had undergone regular surgery for over 3 years, and during that time, they'd snipped, sliced, and cut away so many facial lesions, he was almost unrecognizable. "Your usual seat, sir?" Jerry would ask, smiling as he pushed Walter's wheelchair. Do I have a choice in the matter? The plastic surgeons couldn't keep pace with Walter's disfigurement, and, as a result, he'd retreated from life and deteriorated both physically or mentally. Don was 9 years old back in 1977 when his family moved to the house that became their long-term family home. The Benway family attended a viewing the week before they moved in. It was the first time Don had visited the house and met Mr. and Mrs. Jolly. The couple had lived there most of their adult lives and cherished their old place. Despite their advanced years, they'd maintained the garden, and the Benway family would inherit an impressive collection of mature trees, shrubs, and plants, not to mention a curious menagerie of assorted wildlife. While Mr. Jolly escorted Don's parents around the interior, Mrs. Jolly showed the lad all the secret nooks and crannies in the garden, concluding her tour with an introduction to her tortoises, Thomas and Tabitha. Don's face beamed like an early morning sunrise when he met the wrinkly old reptiles. Their cold, scaly flesh and severe faces were both characterful and hideous at the same time. The old lady encouraged Don to offer them lettuce. His hand trembled as he offered the crisp leaves, and he laughed out loud when they recoiled into their gnarled shells. "Oh no, what did I do?" "Don't worry, they'll get used to you." "Are you leaving them here?" "It's their home," she said, "and they'll bring good luck." She held Don's hand and, holding his gaze, made him promise to look after them. "I'll do my best," he said. "Let's meet the other creatures." "Yes, please," he said with twinkling eyes. Mrs. Jolly introduced Don to the other inhabitants of her garden, explaining how to care for the small aviary of chirruping canaries and the modest, ornamental pond containing a dozen lethargic goldfish. At the exchange of contracts, the conveyancing solicitor notified Don's parents about the deal breaker. It's yes to the menagerie, or no sale. Don's father's jaw sagged in disbelief, and he voiced his objections, saying how much he couldn't abide pets. The lawyer shrugged and made it clear he got paid either way. However, Don's mother, Anita, had fallen in love with the house and fought her corner. Mr. Benway backed down for once and agreed to sign, providing he had no responsibility for the damn beasts. So said, so done. The completion date went ahead as planned, despite Walter's issue with the caveat, and he refused to acknowledge the animals. "I can't see the point of those ugly old creatures," he said, shaking his head. "They're supposed to bring good luck," Don said, "if we look after them. But they look half dead to me," said Walter. "And they're so slow." "You'll be old and creaking one day," said his wife. "Nobody would miss them if they were dumped in a hole and covered in soil." Don's mother rolled her eyeballs and sighed. She knew how to pick her battles and when to walk away from a pointless conversation. The solicitor completed the legal arrangements, and Don assumed charge of his new animal companions. Prior to marriage, Anita Benway had enjoyed the company of an excitable terrier called Dougal, who now lived with Don's maternal grandmother. "Don't you miss Dougal?" Don asked his mother one day. "Why, yes," she'd said. "But I can't look after him here, dear." "Why not?" "Your father's not keen," she'd said, sighing. Besides, Dougal's splendid company for Granny. Under the circumstances, Don was fortunate his father granted him any time to care for the motley collection in their new garden. The new-found responsibility was a life-enhancing experience Don would remember forever. However short-lived, it was the goldfish that vanished first. Mr. Benway blamed the local heron for their disappearance. Don accepted his father's explanation without question, and it wasn't until years later that he queried events. It was possible the beady-eyed predator had spotted the listless fish basking in the warm summer water. But had it swooped down and skewered them? It was doubtful, because they'd covered the water with a strawberry net designed to prevent such an occurrence. There was little chance of the bird reaching beneath the mesh, unless somebody had removed it. Walter's skin complaint started with one or two minor blemishes. He couldn't stop scratching. He had dry patches on his cheekbones, forehead, and temples that irritated him. The long-term result of a casual indifference to the perils of sunburn and skin protection. Don noticed him digging at them with his fingernails while he read his newspaper, watched TV, and during mealtimes at the dining table. Walter's urge to scratch was an instinctive and almost unconscious reaction. His tiny weeping sores would bleed, scab over, dry out, and itch like mad again. The aviary remained intact for about a year, until the last of the canaries vanished. It never occurred to Don that their dwindling numbers might be associated with his father's activities in the garden. Don was diligent about shutting the wire mesh door after feeding times, and couldn't work out how it was often ajar, or why Mephistopheles, the neighbor's tabby, looked so pleased with himself, licking his moist claws as if he'd enjoyed a 3-course meal. Walter dismantled the rickety wooden structure after the last resident disappeared and burned the remains at Halloween. Dawn asked for a replacement. It wasn't an option. "You'll just have to be happy with the tortoises, son," said his father, smirking, "and make the most of them while they're alive and kicking." It was after Halloween when Dawn first noticed the tortoises had vanished. There was no obvious explanation for their disappearance. He didn't suspect the heron, and Mephistopheles was nowhere to be found. "No point in worrying," said Mr. Benway. "I'm sure they'll return to trouble us again." Dawn's mother was a brave soul, bless her, and always gave sound advice based on common sense and astute observation. Anita had warned Walter about the dangers of scratching himself years before she passed away. She told her husband he was making his complaint worse and threatened to either clip his fingernails or knit him woolen mittens to prevent irritation and subsequent infection. Walter tutted with exasperation at her remarks, despite acknowledging she was correct. But would he stop? No way. In Anita's absence, Walter persisted against her advice, and his condition deteriorated. After 15 years of itching and scratching, the affected areas of skin expanded beyond all expectation, screaming out loud for medical intervention. It's standard practice to have sun-damaged skin removed, Walter's consultant said, recommending an initial series of minor operations to remove the first malignant lumps. The surgeons described the offending growths as blossoms, as if they were intriguing botanical discoveries to be dissected, examined, and archived for future generations of horticulturists to study and discuss in their PhD essays. 3 years ago, Walter's consultant found a lump on his neck that looked like cancer. He took a sample, and the lab results were indisputable. It was serious. They had to take positive action. The hospital rushed Dawn's father to the front of the queue. Within 2 weeks, they admitted him to hospital and started a month-long course of radiotherapy, resulting in emergency surgery. They removed a golf ball-sized tumor growing on his neck between his clavicle and jawbone. Walter's condition had started as sun damage and developed into galloping melanomas. It was the turning point for Walter. The oncologist gave him a low percentage chance of surviving another year. Contrary to his prediction, however, they prolonged Walter's life a further 3 years, but at a cost. Dawn's father took on an uncanny appearance. His once inquisitive and bright features disappeared after countless amounts of invasive surgery. The tip of his left ear was the first item to be snipped off. His attitude was stoic at that point. "It's you lot that have the problem," he'd said, brushing aside the issue. "I don't have to look at it, and I'm not worried about losing it." Very brave, Dawn thought, until the other ear faced the same treatment. Walter was much less philosophical at that point. He often pondered on cause and effect, and cursed his years of pottering about in the sun and dodging his wife's factor 20. 2 years later, and he had both ears removed and 80% of his nose. Both nostrils were bloody gashes, above stretched and scabbed, beak-like lips. Both eyes stared, unblinking, out of lidless sockets, and they'd reconstructed his forehead and eyebrows with pale and ill-matching flesh grafts. In places, the new skin flapped like an unfurled sail in the doldrums, and in other locations, it was tight like a snare drum at a state funeral. His entire head had become a work in progress because the surgeons had struggled to keep pace with malignant outcrops. They passed him around the department for every aspiring surgeon to add to the disfigured conglomeration, rebuilding his features as if he were an ancient building in need of a facelift, bashed back into shape, and finished with a few quick licks of skin-toned emulsion. It's easy to underestimate the psychological damage inflicted. Walter's habits changed to accommodate the process of assessment, consultation, and surgical procedure. He seldom ventured out during daylight, and then, with a great coat and a raised collar, his own shell-like protection, like a reptilian secret agent, disguising himself and hiding from the world, lest he draw aghast reactions or pitiful, tight-lipped expressions of sympathy. It was painful to watch the slow transformation unfold, and heartbreaking to witness him become a wretched creature, hobbling about like the monstrous denizen of Geneva that Mary Shelley transformed into a famous fictional creation, stitched together from ill-matched body parts and second-hand components, and destined to a lonely existence, or hounded by ignorant townsfolk baying for blood. For the last year, every part of Walter's life revolved around the work required to fix him up and restore some degree of his former dignity. Given the state of his face since they started tweaking and tinkering with his facial lesions, he would have been better off employing Cecilia Gimenez to restore his looks. At least her work was consistent, as poor as it may be. In Walter's case, it looked as if they'd invited a dozen Cecilias to have a go. Don couldn't help looking at his father and thinking about the absent tortoises, their unblinking eyes, angular beaks, and scaly reptilian skin. He didn't believe in reincarnation, but Don couldn't help wondering if the missing amphibians had made their presence felt in some awful and grisly fashion. Creatures embroiled in karma's stealthy activities, visiting the family, perhaps in some other guise, to remind everyone that life in all its forms matters. It was after Mr. Benway's recent funeral that Don discovered the remains of Thomas and Tabitha. He was turning over the soil to the rear of the old family home when his spade hit something hard. After further investigation in the immediate area, Don unearthed not one, but two hollowed-out tortoise shells, their former inhabitants long reclaimed back to the earth. With the grim remains at his feet and the childhood memories of the menagerie's quiet demise, Don clenched his jaw and drew a long breath. What would drive any creature to burrow into the ground to die? A question he had long abandoned returned to haunt him. Surely it wasn't deliberate. The fix, the shorts and t-shirt, clad exercisers of various shapes and fitness levels, sipping their beverages while panting, stretching, beads of sweat on their foreheads, drying in the cool evening air, dark patches on their backs and stomachs, glaring like mournful, weeping eyes, making you feel guilty about unused gym membership that's about to expire. The tap-tap-tapping keyboard pounders, lost in worlds of their own creation, focused on the words appearing on their screens, working or creating for themselves or others. Lidded containers overseeing, like proud agents by their sides, offering encouragement, support, reward in liquid form for their efforts, judging you for your collection of rejections. The well-dressed dog lovers, their own drinks an afterthought, as they busy themselves making sure their pets have enough water in their thoughtfully provided bowls and are sitting obediently, earning treats by not making a racket. Walker and walkie taking a well-earned rest before heading home, reminding you of haunted rooms you can no longer return to. The lovers, the partners, the same-sex and opposite-sex couples, clutching hands across tables in one of 3 marquees around the hissing, steaming hazelnut, caramel, and vanilla-scented truck that has appeared in the park. Paper cup professors of caffeinated romance misting the air between glances with tendrils of tender loving steam, taunting you with wafting depictions of what was, what would have been, what no more will. The sights, the scents, the sounds of people alive, happy in this moment with their others or in their own skin, following their still unbeaten paths, writing the lyrics of their songs, being, doing, loving with some kind of purpose, forcing a lump to lodge in your throat when you question yours, a purpose you no longer have, and perhaps never did. The something you did have, the someone who you loved and who loved you back unconditionally despite your flaws and transgressions, the someone who gave you reasons to get up, to self-motivate, who inspired you to be better, to try hard, reasons that no longer exist, the shame, the warmth in your hand, in the quickly cooling air as you accept what the man in the truck hands you, the thanks you offer, insincere, as you meet his crystalline gaze and sever it, burnt by eye contact, by those smiling irises, contentment radiating from them like accusatory lasers, making you feel ungrateful for the life you have squandered and the breath you have taken for granted. The glitch-like, stuttering awkwardness with which you turn from that man in the pristine white apron and peculiar, cocked red beret, refusing the lid and the napkins, head hung low as you seek out the most isolated table in the most empty marquee, ignoring all others as you move towards it. The laughs and snippets of conversation from people in person or on phones, chatting to family, friends, loved ones, giving household instructions, finalizing meetup plans, complaining about workloads that are stressful, making you wish you could call her about such things, making you aware of how much you threw away, the jerk of the head when you accidentally meet a woman's eyes, the ignoring of her friendly nod and greeting, the severe swerve in another direction, to slink into a seat in a lonely corner, the escape, the length of gauze wrapped around your knuckles, successfully preventing color seeping through, the clean vinyl tablecloth on the rickety picnic table, the coarse wooden bench tucked beneath, the absence of someone taking a seat beside you with their soy milk, gluten-free latte, and blueberry muffin, the swaying attendee dressed like the vendor in beret and apron, but beyond that clad in denim, head to toe, feet strapped into hobnail boots, meandering from table to table, marquee to marquee, like the needle in a broken compass that can't find north. Cloth in one hand, multi-purpose cleaning spray in the other, squirting, wiping, cleaning in no rush, smiling to no one. He ambles, a grateful glint in his green eyes, the smooth, milky liquid in your mouth as you lift your uninjured hand and tilt your head back. The difficulty swallowing the lump, the warmth flowing into your chest, melting the frozen surface of your cracked, glacial heart, the guilt, the thought of the note in one jacket pocket, the words for your mother, the apology, the weight of the newly purchased box cutter in the other, the shameful plan, this unexpected stop on the way to execute it, the coffee truck and setup that wasn't there that morning or ever before, when things were normal, the same, when you tried and made an effort to be strong, when you were wanted by someone better than you, though you had little to offer, the rising, silvery disk squinting behind jostling clouds, the quieting day, the fading light, the blinding, screaming, retching recollections of champagne and cake and celebration for a writer's work selected for publication, the realization of a long-held dream, the receipt of long-awaited recognition, the saccharine sweet story of success, but hers, not yours, the act, the other attendees, oozing out of the truck, also in aprons, and berets, with eyes that stir and probe, smiling as they enter the marquees, nodding at patrons, pleasant, friendly, nice, busying themselves, loosening ties on poles that hold up side panels, letting white PVC barriers drop to the grass, shutting out the park, the trees, the darkening sky, the faint lunar reflection, broken and distorted in warped, uneven plastic windows. The people in your marquee and others finishing their drinks and standing up, prompted by this closing up routine. The wooden panel in the truck's vending window swinging shut, the shuffling of feet and yapping dogs, the froth and bubbles in the golden brown liquid in your hand, spinning as you swirl it round and round. The lowering level of the fluid as you lift, tilt, gulp, watching it diminish like time. The last marquee, side panel, dropping, trapping you inside like another prison, beyond the ones of meat and bone and thought. Your cellmates making for the loose, hanging flap that is an out. The man reading the newspaper, the woman nursing the baby, the teenager scrolling on phone, standing up and striding from their tables, taking up position by the door, the sudden screams from unseen marquees on either side, making you jump, spill your last precious ounces, knock the bench to the ground as you marionette up, the utterances of shock and surprise, the disbelief and confusion, the discarded newspaper, the babyless bundle of dropped towels, the dark screen phone cast aside, the side panels rising as berated, aproned attendees duck under and in, silent, smiling, shifting like sidling snakes, the flash of pointed teeth as their lips splay wide, the panic, the joggers, the dog walkers, the writers and bound in love souls, pounced on by newspaper reader, fake baby feeder, pretend phone scroller, and others, knocked onto tables and to the ground, clawed and pawed, clothing torn, chests and necks exposed, the yelping dogs that escape into the night as masters and mistresses shriek, the box cutter in your hand, your finger on the switch, the blade click, click, clicking forth, the fear clutching your heart like a pair of hands, throttling the image, the hand on your forehead and the arm around your chest as you hold the blade out to defend, the unbalancing tug, the forced turn, the visage of evil, hovering close, like in a mirror, the beret, the crystal eyes, the gaping maw and teeth, the hypnotic stare that pulverizes the fragments of your clay heart and causes your body to stiffen, the face craning close, the hot breath on your neck, the pop and puncture of flesh, the memories, broken glass, shouted insults. Anger bloomed from the seeds of perceived failure. Raised fists, temperatures, voices, bruises and blood, the teeth sinking in, cold like daggers of ice, the frozen lips clamping to flesh with rubber-like suction. The precious source of life exsanguinating out her face, screaming her dismay. She gave you everything, all her trust and faith, her support. She believed in you. You let her down. The death of love, the box cutter, propelled by instinct, blade slicing through tissue-thin flesh, serrated edge carving up gristle, the steaming, warm essence of all things that live washing over your hand, the gauze bandage stained red at last, the chuckle in your throat as a monster drinks its fill, the realization of futility as a monster surrenders, the smile on your lips, the roll of your eyes, the abandonment of hope and acceptance, the curse of being a coward to the end, the story. What was the story? What was it called? The relief, the story, the one that she wrote, the one about vampires, the release, the vampires who get their caffeine fix from blood, the revulsion, the blood that drains out of your veins. Now the story is yours.